Conway Welsh, and this is Minister Daly as well. So, Senator Conway Welsh, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach, and thank you, Minister, for coming into the House. I want to thank you for taking this commencement matter. I have had notification on the particular school that I submitted around the minor works grant that payment is in process, and I very much welcome that. However, it does leave the wider question of the desperate financial dire straits that many small rural schools are under. And Bangor Erris, the school that we had submitted the notice on, is typical of most rural schools. And there is little point in issuing IT grants, for example, if they cannot keep the school on the day-to-day running. The minor works grant should be mandatory and not dependent just on the money left over at the end of the calendar year. This principle, like many other principles, was dependent on the grant arriving in November, and she feared that the school would not survive financially until January, when the first money of the capitation grant arrives, unless the school went into an overdraft position. And she feels that she couldn't do this already because she relies on fundraising as it is. But Bangor Erris, as I said, is typical of many small rural schools, and it's the parents and pupils of the area who are effectively keeping the school solvent. Under the Capital Review 2016 and 2020, it states that the issue of the minor works grant to primary schools, it's not possible to maintain the school infrastructure without the payment of the minor works grant and the annual summer work scheme. But this principle, like others, is heading into December waiting for this payment. But they still have to pay the cleaner, the secretary, the electricity, the fire alarm service bill, the oil, the refuse bins, the photocopier, the security alarm, the monitoring and the rising cost of school insurance without the basic financial support. And this principle as well cites France and its local council that looks after all of these basic commodities and the services for the smaller schools. Forcing a small school principal to source and maintain these services is effectively asking them as a teacher, to be a principal, to be an accountant and to be a contractor. And there's a feeling amongst principals out there of the smaller rural schools that the larger the school is, the more money that's available to support it. Now, I'm sure the larger schools as well, and I know they have their financial challenges. But how does it make sense to give a teaching principal teaching 26 pupils of 4 different class levels in one classroom 15 administrative days to do her work, and yet give a principal with over 7 colleagues the support posts of 183 administrative days? It just doesn't tally up. And I suppose the question is, does the government have a strategy for helping smaller schools, often with teaching principals who are currently facing severe financial pressure and rising administrative burdens? There is a feeling that the smaller the school, the more isolated it is in the area, the more financial constraints it's under. I suppose more and more of these schools are trying to teach multiple of classes across multiple disciplines. Primary school, as you will know, is hugely important for the education cycle of any particular child. And if the schools are starved of resources, or continue to be starved of resources the way that they are, the pressure it puts under families, because families cannot afford to be all the time paying into what is supposed to be a free education system, again to teachers trying to do their jobs and maintain everything that goes on in a school, dealing with home challenges and everything else, and trying to teach children of different abilities, to have to worry about whether they can pay the bills or not isn't acceptable at this stage. Thank you, Minister.
And Tara.
And thank you, Senator, for raising what is a very real issue for many schools, and one that I understand very well. In a former life, I was a principal of a small school, so I understand firsthand what's the difficulties in trying to manage the finances and keep a school afloat, and the vagaries of the various different funding models and the reliance on it. I think I heard a good line one time. I heard somebody speak about, I think it was the INTO speaking, that you don't see the local Gardaí having to do cake sales to run the local Garda station. So there is challenges there. Just on the issue, first of all, that you raised there, the minor works grant, I'm glad to confirm that Minister Bruton did announce yesterday the minor works grants of €28.8 million were confirmed yesterday, and schools are notified, and I think they'll get the money within the next week, and that will be welcome. And I too, like I'm sure most politicians in the House, had a number of emails in from principals in the last couple of days and the last week or so, fretting about whether this money was going to come at all. But I suppose the Minister did announce last year, when he announced the minor works grants in 2017, he did confirm that he would be announcing them again late in 2018. So, I suppose there was a level of, from the Minister's part, it was flagged that it would be late in the year before they would be announced, and that's how it has happened. The importance of the minor works grants to schools, including smaller schools, is fully understood. Notwithstanding the other significant demands on resources at this time, the rates payable under the minor works grant are €5,500 per school, plus €18.50 per mainstream pupil and €74 per special needs pupil attending a special school or a special class. Schools can use the grant for a variety of school works, including improvements to school buildings and grounds, improvement or replacement of mechanical and electrical services, the purchase of standard furniture and physical education equipment, the purchase of floor coverings and window blinds, and the purchase of IT-related equipment. I am aware that primary schools, including smaller schools, would wish to have certainty with regard to the availability of the minor works grant on an annual basis. This is an issue that will be reviewed in the context of the Department of Education and Skills, long-term infrastructural planning and the level of resources available under the Government's 10-year public capital investment plan, which is currently under development. The demographic pressures at both primary and post-primary level mean that the Department's school building programme must continue to focus on delivering additional school places. In 2017, that building programme has successfully delivered nearly 19,000 permanent school places, of which more than 13,000 are additional places, with the completion of 46 major school building projects. Again, I wish to thank the Senator for giving me the opportunity to outline the current position regarding the minor works grant 2017-2018.
Supplementary.
For that response, and I am pleased that the announcement was made. I would ask that that be expedited so that it gets into the bank accounts of the schools as quickly as possible, and to ask, could it be considered for next year that the grant would be brought forward, even if it was brought forward a month. I think you wouldn't have everything rushing into the last couple of weeks when teachers are so busy, even with things like plays and just rounding up the school year and tests and everything else that needs to be done at that particular time. If the grant was to be made available a bit earlier, I think it would ease that pressure. But I do also think that the funding of national schools needs to be really examined in terms of the resources put in there and the value we get back for that. It is expenditure that you will get back 100 times over if we provide a proper education for our children and take the pressure off parents as well, who find this a really expensive time of year. Thank you.
Very good. Is there anything you want to add, Senator?
Yeah, I'll just answer very briefly that I take on board your point. It probably will be late next year. There's no point in pretending otherwise. It will be late again next year. It will be November, December before the minor works grants. But there will be €77 million in capitation funding made available to all primary schools in January of next year. So that should help. I think that will considerably help towards alleviating funding pressures on schools, and that will be done in January of next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you.